rather, say that the talk was indeed productive and that it lasted about 15 minutes or so. The two leaders agreed they would have more talks as well down the track as U.S. officials push for a peace deal to end the fighting between Russia and Ukraine. We're going to welcome our panel to talk about this further. We have Rina Shah. She's a GOP strategist, and David Katz, a Democratic strategist. Appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. What a moment in time as we witness history and get to report on it today. Thanks.
Great to be with you, Anna.
Rina, we'll start with you. On the campaign trail, President Trump, he promised on repeat, I mean, in every campaign speech almost, to end the war in Ukraine on day one. And now President Trump says that campaign promise, it was just an exaggeration, it was just hyperbole. Is he going to be able to broker a peace deal?
And that is what people are hoping, of course, on both sides of the aisle. Everybody wants to see an end to the senseless violence there in Ukraine that has been the result of Russia's invasion into Ukraine for now 2+ years. What we're looking at when we see one nation invade another like this to essentially trample on their sovereignty, we see geopolitical rumbles that seem endless. And like I said, there is bipartisan consensus to this end the war in Ukraine. But we have to also talk about really what it means to get there. And there are supporters of President Trump who say he has a clear-eye approach to Putin prioritizing American interests and peace through strength. Now, look, Trump's skepticism of endless Ukraine aid, which is about $113 billion since 2022, pushes for a deal that stops the war without weakening NATO. Now, to put some context on it, too, it's important. U.S. aid to Ukraine reached $113 billion by 2025, per CRS reports, as I just said. But Trump's comments really suggest that he doubts Putin wants peace, but sees negotiation as viable. And Crimea is really the major sticking point here because nobody on the left especially wants to see any territories ceded.
Yeah, and when Putin launched that attack on Ukraine a couple nights ago and President Trump tweeted, Vladimir, stop, many people were saying that reminded them of some rhetoric we heard from President Biden that fell on deaf ears and Republicans really criticized. David, Vice President J.D. Vance, we remember how all of that unfolded in the Oval Office. Some folks in your party called it an ambush by J.D. Vance that led to the explosion and Zelenskyy virtually being thrown out of the White House. But now J.D. Vance is saying that the United States might have to take a step back if a deal is not reached between Ukraine and Russia. Let's listen to that. I'll let you respond.
We've issued a very explicit proposal to both the Russians and the Ukrainians, and it's time for them to either say yes or for the United States to walk away from this process. We've engaged in an extraordinary amount of diplomacy, of on-the-ground work. We've really tried to understand things from the perspective of both the Ukrainians and the Russians.
David, is there a point where the U.S. should walk away?
Well, first of all, I'm so glad to hear Rina, a Republican, say those things because I'm a Democrat who worked for President Reagan for 6 years. I remember the Cold War really well. I remember Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall. And Trump ought to be saying to Putin, stop bombing and killing and raping and pillaging Ukraine. That's what America stands for. We can't walk away. We have to keep funding Ukraine in the war. Yes, the Europeans are doing it more, and that's all to the good. But we need to stand there by Ukraine. We need to give them intelligence resources so they're not always caught off guard and attacked and killed and have their churches and buildings blown up by Putin.
All right, Rina, I'm going to bring you back in for this one because we have some new polling that's come in from the New York Times and Siena College. It finds 66% would describe Trump's second term as chaotic. So look at this here. Are Republicans concerned about this as we inch toward 100 days on Wednesday?
I actually don't think that many Republicans here inside Washington, D.C. are taking these numbers very seriously. And I myself don't, because, look, that polling ebbs and flows. As we know, that voter sentiment can really shift around the most major headlines of the day. And right now, they are about geopolitical tension. I mean, one point I want to make here is that the amount of information the average American is getting is really leaving them feeling very bombarded. And what we've seen in this era is people are going to their silos and seeking information that they believe is right. And where that's coming from sometimes is rife with misinformation, disinformation. For example, one point that gets lost is that Trump's sanctions on Russia in his first term were tougher than those that Obama did. And so that is something that, the Republicans need to push on to make sure that the right information is getting out to voters, though the pace of news has felt very maddening so far in this first 100-day stretch. I really believe that national Republicans can keep saving Trump from really bad numbers, because we know President Trump really works for the numbers, and his strategy, how he operates from the White House every day, really deals in what he's getting from the public. He's very reactive in that way. No surprise, but I have confidence that the national Republicans in general will do better on numbers as things start to shake out. Maybe we see peace in Ukraine and people will start to credit Trump. I sure hope so.
And David, what do Democrats make of this new polling? And are Democrats doing enough right now as we inch toward 100 days to make their case and send their message and figure out what their message is?
Well, people like Rina, who appears to be the center of the Republican Party, she needs to talk to these Republican senators, because I'm not one of those people who want to see a huge left-wing reaction when the Democrats get back into power, which I believe they will in both houses of Congress in a year and a half, and back into the presidency, we'll have a Democrat in 3.5 years. I want to see a loyal, hardworking, conscientious Republican minority. And they're not even going to be that. They're about to get swamped. This 66 number is real. That means people have come out of the silos, independents and Republicans, and said enough of this chaos, these tariffs back and forth. We're about to have empty store shelves. And that's not something that anybody voted for. And this attack on the rule of law, handcuffing a Wisconsin state judge. I mean, if this woman, judge, should have been taken into court on a summons, that's one thing. But to go hook her up and perp walk her, this makes a terrible impression on the American people. It looks like intimidation. It's overreach. And I don't want to see the FBI circumscribed. I was a prosecutor for 7 years. I don't want to see the FBI circumscribed. But if the Democrats back into power and they keep doing things like this, we're going to go all the way to the other extreme from Trump. And I want us to stay in the middle, as we did with Reagan and the Reagan Democrats.
Yeah, it does have a tendency to really swing and sometimes overswing. Take a look at this. We've got photos of Trump 2028 merchandise really circulating online right now. And now we have a photo of this. Look who's there. Even Eric Trump, the president's son, posting a photo with a hat that says Trump 2028. And Steve Bannon teasing the run to NewsNation's Chris Cuomo last night. Listen.
Trump, basically, the implication there is Trump's running in 2028. That's why they put the merch up.
Is this just like needling and razzing here? Rina, real quick, is Trump going to run again? Is he going to, I mean, he can't, but is he going to try to?
I wouldn't rule out Don Jr. Trump running or Eric Trump running. I'm not trying to dismiss this. I'm concerned, obviously, that this president currently wants to try to pursue that third term. Constitutional experts can jump in here and obviously fight back with what's there and how this administration can try to skirt between the lines of what's on the books for our nation legally, for what a president can and can't do. But at this point in time, I think they're just trying to get rich off the Trump name, which seems to earn a lot of dollars for them, whether it's the brothers or sons.
Yeah, or whether it's the watches or the gold sneakers. Now we've got these hats. All right, Rina Shah, David Katz. Yep, I'll let you respond. Just real quick, Pete, David.
I'm a former assistant U.S. attorney and a working lawyer. This is going nowhere. We have a constitutional amendment. The constitutional amendment's not going to be changed. And I don't think anybody's going to run as Trump's patsy. You know, they talked about that. Maybe Vance or one of his kids would run as his patsy, and then he would actually run as vice president. He's not going to go with that loophole. His voters aren't going to go with that loophole. He's a lame duck. Trump's a lame duck. That's the reality.